The massive space station orbited Zelaton Prime like a blackened moon. Its hull stretched for kilometers in every direction, a silent fortress of metal and intention. To the Zelithian hegemony, this station was not just an anchor of power, it was a monument to inevitability. Inside its command center, Supreme Chancellor Vexithara studied the galaxy in holographic form. Spirals of starlight filled the chamber, each arm marked with the blood-red glow of conquered systems. More than 400 worlds lay under hegemony control. Each dot was a scar, proof of 2 centuries of calculated violence, enslavement, and expansion. The Chancellor moved with deliberate grace. Even among the tall Zelithians, she stood out, her scaled, blue-gleaming skin reflecting the harsh command center lights. With 4 powerful arms, she adjusted the holographic projection, drawing her attention to the galaxy's outer rim, where untamed stars waited. Waiting to be consumed. Her empire had never failed in conquest. Why should it begin now? Admiral Sexaval entered, his presence carrying the weight of 60 years of war. His darker scales bore the deep scars of plasma burns and blade strikes. He was the embodiment of the hegemony's philosophy, violence as truth, dominance as order. Chancellor, he announced, bowing slightly, the border fleets have sent their reports. Show me. At her command, the holographic display shifted. Red systems pulsed with domination, and yellow dots appeared along the frontier, candidates for the next expansion. Most of these stars harbored civilizations still young, still fragile. Civilizations destined to collapse in days once hegemony ships arrived. The Thelon Confederacy continues to resist us in Sector 7, Sexaval explained. Their trading stations supply resources to several independent worlds. If removed, resistance in that sector will falter. The Chancellor considered this carefully. The Thelon were insectoid, a species known for trade, not for war. They had never raised weapons against the hegemony, but that did not matter. In fact, their pacifism made them perfect. Their destruction would be a demonstration, a message to every other world daring to imagine independence. Authorize Battle Group 12, she commanded. Eliminate their trading hub. Do it where all may see. Fear, Admiral, is more effective than negotiation. Within hours, 50 hegemony dreadnoughts moved toward Thelon space. Their mission was not conquest. It was erasure. Far across the galaxy, another vessel wandered the void. The TS Valiant, one of Earth's most advanced exploration ships, glided through the darkness between stars. Its mission was peaceful, designed not for war but for knowledge. Captain Ryan Blake had been charting unclaimed space for 8 months, cataloging nebulae, measuring star systems, and searching for the faintest signs of intelligent life. He did not expect to find carnage. His display filled with wreckage, torn metal, drifting bodies, shattered fragments of something once whole. The architectural style was unmistakable to anyone trained in xenobiology, Thelon. A trading hub, now only debris orbiting an empty star. Captain, I'm detecting survivors, Lieutenant Amy Foster reported. Her voice carried both urgency and sorrow. They're broadcasting distress signals, peaceful contact frequencies. Blake's chest tightened. Put them through. The transmission was weak, static-filled, but the voice that emerged was clear enough, strained, trembling, yet still dignified. A Thelon survivor described the attack. The hegemony had arrived without warning, demanded surrender, then fired when Thelon leaders tried to speak. 50 warships against 1 defensive station. Blake's fists clenched against the console. He asked how many had survived. 200, perhaps, came the broken reply. Out of 12,000. They targeted our evacuation ships. Most of our families were lost in the first strikes. For humanity, the rules of space had always been clear: first contact meant diplomacy, not annihilation. Attacking civilians was unthinkable, a violation not just of treaties, but of basic moral order. To Blake, this massacre was more than tragedy, it was a warning. "We're transmitting medical supplies and emergency shelters," he said gently. "But tell me, who are these attackers?" The survivor hesitated, then spoke the name for the first time in human history. "They call themselves, the Zalithian hegemony." Back on Zelaton Prime, the Supreme Chancellor studied another anomaly. Among the endless reports of resources extracted and populations pacified, one item stood out: strange energy signatures in Sector 12. "What of these readings?" she asked, her forearms folding in thought. Admiral Sexaval dismissed them with a flick of a scarred claw. "Primitive. Likely a developing world experimenting with atomic power. Nothing worth our concern." The Chancellor smiled. Primitive or not, every new species was an opportunity, for slaves, for resources, for conquest. "Continue monitoring. Once the Thelen are dealt with, we will investigate." And so, while the hegemony turned its gaze inward, Captain Ryan Blake turned his ship toward Earth, carrying with him the first proof of humanity's greatest trial. He would be the one to deliver the warning, that a galactic empire of overwhelming force was expanding, and that one day, its fleets would arrive at Sol. Unknown to him, fragments of his own transmission had been intercepted. The hegemony's deep space sensors caught faint traces of human communication. They dismissed it, of course. Another, primitive, world playing with signals they barely understood. That arrogance would be their first fatal mistake. Viewers, imagine standing where Captain Blake stood. Imagine being the first human to hear the name Zalithian hegemony, to witness the broken remains of an alien people wiped out in moments. Would you feel fear? Rage? Or perhaps wonder at the scale of what humanity had stumbled into? Let me know what you would have done in Captain Blake's place. Would you have stayed to help the Thelen, or raced back to warn Earth, as Blake did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're drawn to stories where humanity is tested against empires older, larger, and more merciless than we can imagine, subscribe, because this story is only beginning. The Zalithian hegemony had never known true resistance. For 2 centuries, their fleets carved through the galaxy like a blade through fragile cloth. Every new civilization they encountered bent beneath their will or perished. But then, they found Earth. It began almost quietly, a lone Zalithian scout vessel crossing the outer edge of Sol. Its mission was simple: record, classify, and report back. But the encounter with Earth's defense satellites was anything but simple. The scout ship expected primitive signals, perhaps atmospheric aircraft, maybe early orbital stations. Instead, it found coordinated tracking systems, directed energy weapons, and missiles that pierced its shields. Within minutes, the vessel was reduced to debris, vaporized in a burst of fire visible from Mars' orbit. The hegemony responded as they always did, with overwhelming force. Battle Group 12 was redirected from its campaign against the Thelen to Sol. 50 warships, each capable of destroying a planet's defenses in hours, surged into human space. Their commanders were confident. The humans would be crushed like insects. But humanity was not the Thelen. From the orbit of Earth, Admiral Jonathan Reyes watched as the first wave of alien ships emerged from hyperspace. His fleet was small by comparison, a collection of destroyers, cruisers, and a handful of prototype carriers. Against the hegemony, they were outnumbered 5-1. Yet Reyes felt no despair. Humanity had known war since its beginning. The scale was new, the technology alien, but the instinct to resist was ancient. "We stand at Sol," he told his officers. "If we fall here, humanity falls everywhere. Remember that when the firing starts." The battle began with a storm of light. Zalithian plasma lances burned across the void, tearing apart orbital platforms in minutes. Entire habitats fell in flame toward Earth's atmosphere. Yet the humans answered with a ferocity the hegemony had not anticipated. Railguns thundered. Missiles screamed through the void, shattering shields with raw kinetic force. Squadrons of human pilots, fragile, short-lived compared to Zalithian warships, darted between capital vessels, tearing open vulnerabilities, sacrificing themselves for a chance at survival. The hegemony laughed at first. Such resistance was futile. Their victory was inevitable. But then, something unexpected happened. On the surface of Mars, hidden deep within Olympus Mons, humanity unleashed its first true secret weapon. Project Helios, a weapon born of desperation, fusing Earth's most advanced physics with centuries of military pragmatism. A beam of focused energy erupted from Mars, carving through space and tearing directly into the lead Zalithian dreadnought. Its shields collapsed in an instant, and within moments, the once proud vessel was reduced to molten slag drifting silently across the void. The laughter in the Zalithian command ship died. Admiral Sexaval himself had arrived to oversee the pacification of Sol. When his flagship registered the destruction of one of his dreadnoughts, a ship thought invincible, his 4 hands clenched in rage. Primitive vermin, he snarled. They dare defy the hegemony? He ordered the fleet forward. Yet the humans fought like no species the hegemony had ever encountered. They did not break. They did not flee. Every ship that fell seemed only to harden their resolve. Even in defeat, they struck back with precision and fury. By the end of the first day, Earth's orbit was littered with burning wreckage, human and Zalithian alike. The hegemony lost 12 ships. Humanity had lost more than 50. But the key fact remained, the invincible hegemony had lost ships. The myth of their untouchable supremacy had cracked. Word of the battle spread faster than the hegemony could contain it. Traitors whispered in the outer systems. Neutral observers transmitted what they saw. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy witnessed something they had thought impossible, a species standing against the Zalithian hegemony and surviving. Fear began to shift. No longer was it only the fear of the hegemony's iron grip. Now it was something new, something uncertain, fear of humanity. Felon survivors told their story to anyone who would listen. They described the humans not just as warriors, but as creatures of terrifying will. They do not yield, one said, voice trembling. Even when their fleets burn, they fight on. They remind me of fire. You can stamp on flames, but the more you strike, the more they spread. Back on Zelatin Prime, the Supreme Chancellor studied the reports in silence. 4 of her arms rested on the holographic display, while the other 2 traced patterns across the map of the galaxy. Losses? She asked coldly. Unacceptable, Admiral Sexaval admitted, though his voice quivered with restrained fury. The humans are resilient. They adapt faster than predicted. They struck at weaknesses no other species has exploited. Are they advanced? The Chancellor asked. No. Their technology lags behind ours by centuries. But their will, he hesitated. Their will is unlike anything I've seen. The Chancellor leaned back, her scaled features reflecting the starlight of the projection. For the first time in her reign, she considered the possibility of an empire that would not yield. Not because of weapons. Not because of resources. But because of something deeper, something unquantifiable. They must be broken quickly, she declared. Before the galaxy begins to believe they cannot be broken. On Earth, Admiral Reyes stood among the ruins of Orbital Command. He had lost thousands of men and women. Cities had burned. But humanity still lived. And more than that, humanity had proven something vital. They could bleed the hegemony. This was not our end, Reyes told his surviving commanders. This was our beginning. They came here to erase us. Instead, they showed us what we must become. In that moment, humanity's war was no longer about survival. It was about something greater, the chance to change the galaxy forever. To you watching, imagine standing on Earth that day. Imagine looking up at the night sky, knowing an empire older than any human nation had just tried to erase you. Would you have felt despair? Or would you have felt defiance, the unshakable need to fight, no matter the cost? Share your thoughts below. Do you believe humanity's greatest weapon is its technology, or its will? And if this story of resistance against impossible odds resonates with you, subscribe and stay with us. Because what comes next is not only war, but revelation. The Battle of Sol did not end the war. Humanity had not won, not in the way wars are usually measured. Cities still burned. Fleets still shattered. The Zalithian hegemony remained vast, its reach spanning thousands of worlds. And yet, something had shifted. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy had seen the impossible, a people who stood against the hegemony and survived. The story of Sol spread through smugglers' channels, neutral relays, even whispers in hegemony-controlled systems. Each retelling grew, embellished with awe and fear. The hegemony had lost ships. They had lost commanders. And most dangerous of all, they had lost their aura of inevitability. On distant worlds, slaves whispered of Earth. Some called humanity reckless. Others called them doomed. But more and more, the galaxy began to ask a forbidden question: if the humans could resist, why couldn't we? The Supreme Chancellor of the hegemony felt that question echoing across her empire like a fracture in glass. She responded with brutality. Entire colonies were purged. Dissidents erased. The message was clear: resistance meant extinction. Yet repression only fed the legend. For every world silenced, 10 more whispered the name of Sol. Humanity, meanwhile, was transforming. The survivors of Sol were hardened, their grief tempered into determination. Factories burned day and night, producing ships, weapons, and armor. Research accelerated at a pace unseen in human history. What would have taken centuries of progress now happened in years, driven by the single truth: there was no alternative but victory. But something else stirred beneath humanity's rising power, something the galaxy had not expected. It was not just strength. It was not only will. It was imagination. Humans began designing weapons no Zalithian strategist could predict. They exploited asymmetries others overlooked. They fought wars not only with fleets, but with psychology. Propaganda, misinformation, and whispers of defiance spread in the dark between the stars. The hegemony struck back at Earth again and again. And each time, though humanity bled, though cities turned to ash, the humans adapted. They endured. They answered loss with innovation, and fear with fury. It was then, in the silence between battles, that the Harari appeared. Unlike the Zalithians, the Harari were not conquerors. They were older, patient, quiet. Their ships appeared without warning, slender, silver, almost organic in form. They never fired first. They never demanded tribute. Instead, they watched. Admiral Reyes was the first to meet them, aboard a neutral station at the edge of known space. The Harari emissary spoke not with arrogance, but with solemn weight. "You fight the hegemony," it said. "And in this, you are not alone. But beware. The Zalithians are not the greatest danger. Beyond their empire lies something older. Something waiting." Reyes frowned. Older than the hegemony? The Harari's dark eyes reflected starlight. "We call them the architects. They are not rulers in the way you understand. They are not conquerors. They are builders, and destroyers. Long before your kind walked upright, they shaped the galaxy. And when civilizations rise too high, when empires stretch too far, the architects return." Reyes felt a chill settle over him. Humanity had just begun its fight for survival, and already the Harari spoke of another threat, vaster than the one before them. "What do they want?" he asked. The Harari only whispered, "Balance." And then they were gone. For the galaxy, the appearance of the Harari meant little at first. To most, the war was still simple, hegemony against humanity. But in secret archives, in hidden vaults, old records began to resurface, stories of civilizations erased, not by conquerors, but by shadows from the void. The architects had no fleets, no banners, no demands. They simply appeared. And then worlds were gone. The hegemony dismissed such tales as myth. Their focus remained on crushing Earth before the legend grew too dangerous. Yet in the quiet chambers of power, the Supreme Chancellor felt a tremor of unease. She had seen the same records. And she wondered, had humanity's defiance stirred something beyond even her control? On Earth, the people did not know of the architects. To them, the war was immediate, brutal, present. They buried their dead. They built their fleets. And they prepared for the day when humanity would no longer fight merely for survival, but for dominance. Yet whispers lingered. Among the scientists, among the strategists, even among ordinary soldiers staring into the night sky, the question persisted, was humanity fighting only the hegemony, or something greater? The galaxy stood at a crossroads. To the enslaved, humanity was a spark in the darkness, fragile, but enough to kindle hope. To the hegemony, humanity was a disease. One that must be excised before it spread. And to the Harari, humanity was something else entirely, a variable, an anomaly, perhaps the one force unpredictable enough to change the outcome of what was coming. Because somewhere, beyond the stars, the architects were stirring. And so I leave you with a question: if you were among the first humans to learn of the architects, would you tell the world? Or would you keep the truth hidden, fearing it would break what little hope remained? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you followed this story from the rise of the hegemony, through the battle of Soul, to the first whispers of the architects, then you've already seen that humanity's story is only beginning. Subscribe, and join us for what comes next. Because the question is no longer whether humanity can survive. The question is whether humanity can endure the architects themselves.